Ladies, what if I told you the most charming women in history used secret psychological triggers that made people obsessed with them? I'm talking about that woman who walks into a room and has everyone, from CEOs to celebrities, hanging on her every word. The one who never chases but always has high-value people pursuing her. Today, I'm exposing 6 powerful psychological secrets that elite women have guarded for centuries. These aren't your typical, just be confident tips. These are the exact techniques that turn ordinary conversations into deep, addictive connections. And the best part, they work on anyone, regardless of your looks or status. After today, you'll understand why some women seem to have people wrapped around their finger, while others struggle to keep anyone's attention. Get ready, because I'm about to hand you the psychological keys to unlimited influence. Let's begin. The first psychological secret I'm going to share with you is what I call the mirror gate. This is the exact technique that makes some women seem absolutely irresistible within seconds of meeting someone. You've seen it happen. That woman who seems to instantly click with everyone, making them feel like they've known her for years, but here's what's actually happening behind the scenes. When we talk about psychological mirroring, most people think it's just about copying body language, but that's amateur hour. The real power comes from what I call emotional frequency matching. Imagine you have an invisible radar that picks up someone's emotional state. Top female executives and influential women throughout history have mastered this skill. Let me break this down into something you can use right now. When you're talking to someone, instead of focusing on what you'll say next, tune into their emotional energy level. Are they speaking slowly and thoughtfully? Match that rhythm. Are they excited and energetic? Gradually shift your energy up to meet them. This isn't about changing who you are, it's about creating an emotional bridge. Here's where it gets fascinating. Harvard researchers discovered that when two people's emotional frequencies align, their brains literally start to sync up. They release the same neurochemicals, creating an instant feeling of trust and connection. It's like having a psychological skeleton key that opens any social door. But here's the advanced technique that nobody talks about. Once you've matched their energy, you can slowly start to lead it. This is how those magnetically charismatic women can walk into a room full of negative energy and transform it completely. They match first, then gradually shift the emotional temperature to where they want it. Let me give you a real-world example. I had a client, let's call her Sarah, who used this technique during a high-stakes business meeting. Instead of going in with guns blazing, she first matched the serious, analytical tone of the room. Then, once she had everyone's trust, she slowly elevated the energy to create excitement about her proposal. The result, she closed $1 million deal that 3 people before her had failed to land. The key is subtlety. If someone's energy is at a 7, don't match them at exactly 7. That's too obvious. Match them at maybe a 6.5. Then once you've established that connection, you can guide them wherever you want them to go. Now, let's dive into what I call the time tunnel effect. This is the exact psychological trigger that makes some women stay on people's minds for days, even weeks after a brief interaction. You know those rare moments when time seems to slow down during a conversation? That's not an accident, it's a carefully crafted psychological state. Most people think deep connections happen by chance, but here's the truth. Every hypnotic conversationalist in history has understood the power of temporal manipulation. When you master this technique, you can make a 5-minute conversation feel like an intimate hour-long exchange. Here's the fascinating part. Neuroscientists at Stanford discovered that our brains process time differently when we're in states of heightened emotional engagement. It's like having a psychological remote control that can slow down or speed up how others experience time with you. Elite socialites and influential women have been using this unconsciously for centuries. Let me show you exactly how this works. Instead of asking the usual boring questions like, "What do you do?" you're going to use what I call emotional time anchors. These are strategic questions that make people mentally time travel. For example, asking, "What inspired you to start this journey?" instantly transports them to an emotional memory while creating a unique connection with you in the present moment. But here's the advanced application that nobody talks about. You want to create what psychologists call time distortion loops. When someone is sharing a story, you don't just listen, you weave their past emotions into the present moment. If they mention feeling proud of an achievement, you might say, "I can see that same fire in your eyes right now." Boom, you've just created a psychological bridge between their past and present. Let me share a real story. One of my students, Maria, used this at a networking event. Instead of surface-level small talk, she got a CEO to open up about his childhood dream of building companies. By connecting that past passion to his current success, she created such a memorable interaction that he called her the next day, offering a collaboration. That's the power of temporal manipulation. Remember though, this isn't about manipulation. It's about creating genuine moments of connection that stand out in a world of forgettable interactions. When you master this technique, people won't just remember what you said. They'll remember how you made time itself feel different. Our third secret delves into what I call the echo chamber principle, and trust me, this one is going to blow your mind. Have you ever noticed how some women seem to create an almost hypnotic bubble around themselves when they speak, like everyone else in the room just fades into the background? That's not coincidence. It's pure psychological architecture. Most people think charisma is about being the loudest or most energetic in the room. But here's the mind-bending truth. The most influential women in history mastered the art of creating what psychologists call psychological containers. Imagine having the power to create an invisible force field that makes everyone inside feel like they're in a private universe with you. Recent studies from Berkeley's psychology department revealed something fascinating. Our brains are literally wired to create micro-social environments during conversations. When mastered correctly, this creates a phenomenon they call selective social attention, where people become temporarily blind to everything except their interaction with you. Let me break this down into something you can use right now. Instead of trying to be interesting, you're going to create what I call attention anchors. These are subtle psychological triggers that make people feel like they're in a private bubble with you, even in a crowded room. The technique starts with your eyes, not just regular eye contact, but what I call soul scanning. You're not just looking at them, you're looking into them, creating a sense of depth that makes everything else blur away. But here's the advanced technique that separates masters from amateurs. You're going to use what I call environmental diminishment. As you speak, slightly lower your voice, creating a subtle but powerful effect that makes the person lean in slightly. This triggers their brain to start filtering out background noise and focus entirely on you. It's like having a psychological spotlight that you can turn on at will. Let me share something incredible. One of my clients, Jessica, used this technique during a charity gala filled with celebrities and influencers. Instead of trying to compete with all the glamour and noise, she created these intimate psychological bubbles with each person she spoke to. The result? By the end of the night, 3 different millionaires were asking for her contact information, despite barely speaking about business at all. The key to making this work is what I call graduated intimacy. You don't create this bubble instantly. That would feel invasive. Instead, you build it layer by layer, like a master artist adding depth to a painting. Start with open body language, add the soul scanning, then gradually bring in the voice modulation. When done correctly, people won't even realize why they feel so captivated by you. Moving into our fourth powerful psychological secret, let me introduce you to what I call the invisible thread theory. This is where things get really fascinating because we're diving into the subconscious realm of human connection that most people never even notice exists. Have you ever met someone who seemed to read your thoughts before you spoke them? That woman who somehow knows exactly what you need to hear, exactly when you need to hear it? This isn't mind reading. It's a sophisticated psychological technique that's been used by master persuaders and empaths throughout history. The science behind this is mind-blowing. Researchers at MIT's Social Cognitive Lab discovered that our brains have specialized neural networks dedicated to what they call predictive empathy. This is your brain's ability to anticipate emotional responses before they happen. But here's the crazy part. These networks can actually be trained and enhanced, just like a muscle. Let me break down how to master this. Most people make the mistake of focusing on words when they communicate, but words only account for 7% of emotional communication. The real magic happens in what I call the subtext symphony, the invisible layer of communication happening beneath the surface. This is where master communicators operate. Here's the advanced technique that separates true masters from amateurs. You're going to use what I call emotional precognition. Before someone even finishes their sentence, you're already tuning into the emotional current underneath their words. It's like having an emotional GPS that tells you exactly where the conversation needs to go. Let me share something remarkable. One of my students, Alexandra, used this technique during a critical job interview. Instead of just answering questions, she started anticipating the interviewer's concerns before they were voiced. She could sense when the interviewer was skeptical and addressed those doubts before they became obstacles. The result? She beat out 200 other candidates for a position she was technically underqualified for. But here's where it gets really powerful. Once you master emotional precognition, you can start using what I call future pacing bridges. These are subtle verbal and non-verbal cues that make people feel deeply understood without you having to say it explicitly. When someone is sharing a challenging situation, you don't just listen. You're already building a bridge to their desired emotional outcome. The secret to making this work is what I call calibrated sensitivity. You need to tune your emotional radar to pick up on micro-expressions, subtle tone changes, and tiny shifts in body language. It's like developing a sixth sense for human emotion. And once you master this, you'll be able to create connections so deep, people will swear you've known them for years, even if you've just met. Let's unveil our fifth psychological secret, what I call the quantum connection paradox. This technique is so powerful that when I first discovered it in my research, I could hardly believe it wasn't taught in every psychology course. What if I told you that the most magnetic women in history understood something that seems to defy logic itself? They discovered that the strongest connections aren't built on what you share, but on what you strategically withhold. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but stay with me, because this will transform how people respond to you forever. Princeton's Department of Behavioral Psychology recently uncovered something fascinating. Our brains are actually wired to be more attracted to partial information than complete disclosure. They call it information gap theory, but I call it psychological cliffhanging. It's the same principle that makes you binge watch your favorite series, but applied to human interaction. Let me show you how this works in real life. Instead of telling your whole story at once, you're going to use what I call narrative breadcrumbs. These are strategically placed pieces of intriguing information that make people want to know more. Think of it like being the author of a psychological thriller where every revelation leads to a new question. But here's the advanced technique that really separates the masters. You're going to implement what I call curiosity loops. When you share something interesting, you deliberately leave gaps in the story that create cognitive tension. Your listener's brain literally can't rest until it fills in these gaps. It's like planting psychological seeds that grow into fascination. Let me share a powerful example. My client Victoria used this technique at a high-profile social event. Instead of immediately revealing she was a CEO, she dropped subtle hints about her experiences that made people increasingly curious. By the end of the night, people weren't just asking for her business card, they were competing for her attention, all because she understood the power of strategic mystery. The real magic happens when you combine this with what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. Just when someone thinks they've figured you out, you reveal another layer of depth. It's like having an endless Russian doll of fascinating qualities. Each revelation makes them more invested in discovering what else there might be. But remember this crucial point. The goal isn't to be mysterious for mystery's sake. The goal is to create what I call discovery motivation, making people feel like each interaction with you is an exciting journey of revelation. When you master this, people don't just want to talk to you. They become emotionally invested in understanding you. Excellent, let's reveal our final and most powerful psychological technique, what I call the reality distortion matrix. This is the crown jewel of psychological influence, and it's going to change everything you thought you knew about human connection. What if I told you that the most influential women in history had the ability to literally change how others perceived reality? I'm not talking about manipulation, I'm talking about a psychological phenomenon so powerful that even neuroscientists are still trying to fully understand it. Harvard's Advanced Behavioral Research Lab recently made a groundbreaking discovery. Our brains don't actually perceive objective reality, but rather construct it based on emotional and social cues. They call it neural reality construction, but what they really discovered was something master communicators have intuitively known for centuries. Let me break this down into something you can use right now. Instead of just participating in reality, you're going to learn to architect it using what I call experiential framing. Think of yourself as a movie director, but instead of filming scenes, you're crafting how people experience their interactions with you. Here's the advanced technique that makes this truly transformative. You're going to implement what I call reality anchors. These are carefully chosen words, gestures, and emotional states that literally reprogram how people process their experience of being around you. It's like having a psychological paintbrush that colors how people perceive everything you do. Let me share something extraordinary. My student Diana used this technique during a major company crisis. Instead of getting caught in the panic, she created what I call a calm reality bubble. Through her precise use of language, tone, and presence, she actually shifted how her entire team perceived the crisis. The result? They went from near collapse to finding an innovative solution, and she was promoted to global leadership within a month. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. Once you master reality construction, you can create what psychologists call experiential imprints. These are moments so perfectly crafted that they leave a permanent mark on someone's psychological landscape. When you understand this power, every interaction becomes an opportunity to create an unforgettable impact. The key to wielding this technique responsibly is what I call ethical reality architecture. You're not manipulating. You're creating spaces for positive transformation. It's like being able to turn every interaction into a transformative experience that leaves people feeling more empowered, more capable, and more alive. Chiforo.